beg to move that this House now do adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Alex Mayer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to begin by thanking organisations including the Woodland Trust, Arboricultural Association, the Forestry Commission, Highways England, the HTA, the National Forest Company and Nest Champion, founder of the Biophilic Design Conference, for their engagement ahead of this debate. I think most people like trees. I go around saying that they're great, tremendous indeed. So much so that my mum and dad got me an I Spy Trees book for Christmas, which I think is going to become somewhat more easy to complete over the spring and summer months. Trees are woven into the very fabric of our nation, our culture, our heritage. The apple tree that sparked Newton's revolutionary thinking on gravity, the Tolpadal Martyrs tree, a symbol of solidarity and the birth of the trade union movement, Sherwood Forest, immortalised by Robin Hood, or the famous 100 acres, home to Winnie the Pooh, Tigger and Co. Trees are placemakers. I was recently visiting a new development called Linmere, where trees are quite literally used to sell the place, with marketing material suggesting residents stroll through tree-lined avenues and take in the nature around you. And everyone moving in gets their own new tree in their garden. Trees improve our lives. They improve our health, both physically and mentally. Urban trees, shrubs and hedges reduce exposure to air pollution by dispersing and capturing pollutants like particulate matter and ozone. Collectively, urban woods in the UK do a brilliant job of removing an estimated 7.5 kilotons of pollutants every single year. And trees can also be lifesavers. Research suggests increasing green space by just 1% in the most deprived urban neighbourhoods in England is linked to 37% fewer preventable deaths. Trees reduce flooding. I was struck when I visited a local school on a soggy day last year, and when many homes in the local area and businesses had experienced flooding. And I asked the head teacher that I met, had the school had any problems? And they hadn't. And she pointed to the trees on the playing fields that surrounded us that had intercepted that rainfall and had absorbed so much water. Forest research estimates trees deliver over £400 million a year in flood protection. And those same trees in the summer offer vital shade. And crucially, our trees lock away carbon for decades or even centuries. UK woodlands store around 1 billion tonnes of carbon. And yet, despite all these brilliant benefits, we as a nation are under-treed, well below the European average. And that also makes us the second largest importer of timber in the world. So I am absolutely delighted that this government has pledged to plant 3 new national forests. The first in the west of England is underway, and next the Oxcam Growth Corridor is going to see growth of a different kind, from seed to sapling to forest. £1 billion of investment in tree planting and forestry support over this Parliament. Tree planting at its highest rate in over 20 years. 10,000 football pitches worth planted last year. And plant, plant, plant is a really good mantra. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think we also need to think about something that's perhaps a little less catchy. Establish, establish, establish. Because the first 3 to 5 years of a tree's life are absolutely critical. This is when trees are most vulnerable to drought, damage, disease and death. Of course, tree and woodland creation will always involve some risk. There will be years when the weather means more trees don't make it, even when best practice is followed. But what we are seeing goes far beyond unavoidable loss to the planet and to the public purse. University of Sheffield research found that only 61% of trees meant to be present on new developments were there.
Order. I beg to move that this House now do adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Alex Mayer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So that University of Sheffield research found that 39% of trees were missing or dead. Along the A14, national highways planted over 860,000 trees in 2020, but the failure rate was 45%. More detailed evidence comes from the evaluation of urban tree planting across 4 cities, Bristol, Birmingham, Nottingham and Leeds, covering trees planted between 2012 and 2022. The team say that just finding out what was planted and where it was far harder than it should have been. Record keeping isn't good. Even freedom of information requests didn't yield data. Does it exist? They kept on asking. Of the 820 expected trees they discovered, only 687 were actually planted. So 23% of funded or required trees were never planted at all. Of those that were planted, only 42% were in good condition. Around 1 in 5 had died or been removed. I think you might call it a trajectory. And nearly a third were in poor condition, showing stress, damage or inadequate growth. Very few were growing as we would want them to. The National Audit Office reported £48 million of government investment into the Urban Tree Challenge Fund. If these outcomes are representative, then around £10 million of that investment may already have been lost, literally dead wood. This then is not just a marginal issue, it is a systemic value for money problem. So why are these young trees dying? The research consistently points to similar causes. The wrong tree in the wrong place. I'm struck by how often, especially in new builds, the trees are the responsibility of landscape gardeners. And then there can be a tendency to over-prioritise aesthetics or even a rightful desire to create a sense of place over choosing trees that will survive and thrive. We need better species selection, the right tree in the right place for the right reason, with climate resilience built in. But even if it is in the right place, research shows that young trees are prone to damage from poorly managed stakes and ties, strimmer damage, soil compaction, and sadly also vandalism. Staking particularly is an issue. It should be a temporary support, not a permanent restraint. But there are too many examples of trees literally being strangled, ties that are far too tight, and so restrict the natural expansion of the trunk. So as the tree grows, the ties cut into the bark, disrupting the flow of water and nutrients. Sometimes it simply isn't anyone's job to remove the stakes and ties after a year or so. We see on new developments, landscaping and management fees often don't translate into tree care at all, and in some cases actually actively contribute to tree loss. Another cause of early tree death is insufficient water, because young trees are really thirsty. Newly planted trees need to be watered 2 to 3 times a week. They knock back 50 to 100 pints every time. They need deep and regular soaking. And then establishing trees need water once a week in dry weather. Watering in the first 1 to 2 years is one of the most important factors in whether a tree struggles long term or goes on to thrive. So what needs to change? I know this government is committed to early years. So do we perhaps need a Best Start tree hub as well, where everybody learns about watering and mulching and formative pruning? As I have outlined, data is patchy. How do we do better as a nation? Does the Minister support mandated record keeping, minimum 3 to 5 year aftercare plans, and reporting requirements tied to planning permission, grants and public contracts? In housing development, should tree planting and aftercare contracts always be bundled together so responsibility cannot be passed away? How do we better implement those planning conditions related to aftercare? Now, I expect the Minister may not be able to give me answers to all of this and direct me to some other departments. And that is an important issue too, as trees are not just for DEFRA. They're also about housing and communities and transport and health and more. Yet, for example, MHCLG currently lacks an in-house tree expert. It's been over a decade since the department had an arboriculturalist role, who previously provided expertise on urban trees, including tree planting and tree preservation order regulations, and that's a gap that the sector say they feel keenly. So will the Minister reassure me that the Welcome England Tree Action Plan will have cross-departmental buy-in? Will it contain best practice, including clear schedules for watering, mulching, pruning and monitoring? Much of this, of course, already exists. For example, from the Arboricultural Association, who I know stand ready to support the government, and Highways England, who learnt from their A14 debacle, and survival rates for trees on their 3 million trees project now stands at 85%. Maybe there could also be a section on performance-related tree payments, bonds with sums released only when trees are established. So the reward comes not for planting, but for trees that thrive, so that aftercare can no longer be treated as an afterthought. For the government's ambitions to flourish, we will need thriving tree nurseries. The excellent report Strong Roots has many recommendations to nurture the sector and increase the number of British-grown trees, to better align tree supply with planting grants to give nurseries confidence to invest, so we avoid situations like when the Scottish Government cut its forestry grant scheme budget by 41% back in 2024, to boost training, apprenticeships and skills development in tree production. And one thing that stood out particularly to me, they suggest introducing a British-grown tree certification logo to strengthen market identity. And I can very much imagine seeing the Minister launching the Great British Trees logo. So I really love her comments on that. Madam Deputy Speaker, tree planting without establishment is not climate action, it is waste. But with simple policy changes, we can ensure that young trees survive, thrive and deliver the economic, environmental and social benefits we all know they promise.
Minister Mary Creagh.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. What a pleasure it is to stand in this glorious room, panelled with English oak cut down in the wake of World War II, to refurbish this great chamber of democracy, to stand at this dispatch box crafted from New Zealand puriri wood, a native species and the gift of New Zealand, as I see every time I stand here, and to passionately agree with my honourable friend's opening speech. I'm so grateful to her for bringing this topic to the House today, because across England, trees and woodlands are more than just part of our landscape. They are intimately woven into our national identity. They cool our air, our cities, and shelter our wildlife. And whether it's a walk through an ancient forest or a moment beneath a single tree in a city park, trees have a remarkable ability to restore us. They help us with anxiety, with grief, and with loneliness. They give us space to breathe. And they are woven into our shared national culture. They have stood as symbols of endurance, wisdom, and renewal. And they are centuries-old sentinels, witnesses to our history. Growing up in Coventry, I played every weekend in Coventry's War Memorial Park, a great city's act of remembrance for those that we lost in World War I. For every tree, a plaque beneath, remembering the people that had died, a living memorial to remember the lost. Our woodlands are places where those childhood memories are made and where Christmas strolls and New Year's Day walks become traditions, where children climb and occasionally fall, where dens are made and where dogs are walked, hopefully on a leash. And as Forestry Minister, I have the privilege of regularly seeing the majesty and benefits of our woodlands up close. And I'd like to reassure my honourable friend that we are taking the steps we need to ensure that we have woodlands and trees for the future. Just last year, I opened Forestry England's Delamere Seed Processing Centre, named after long-serving Forestry England team member Vernon Stockton. It will process up to 4 tonnes of high-quality tree seeds, which is providing the starting point for the forests of the future. I've stood beneath the spruce and pine of Creagh Forest with the people who manage it. Oh, can I just say about the seed processing centre, it was, of course, a net zero building, and it was, of course, made from timber. I've stood in Creagh Forest with the people who manage it. I've visited the community forests who sent me home with 2 Scots pine and 2 hornbeams, and I can say that 3 of those trees have survived 3 London droughts. And of course, back in 2011, I led the fight against the party opposite's proposal to sell off the public forest estate. So I am passionate about trees. And she is right to list the benefit of trees, because tree planting in England is at its highest recorded rate for 20 years, 7,000 hectares last year. And we will boost this further through our manifesto commitment to create 3 new national forests. And what a privilege it was to plant a tree as part of that establishment. We will plant 20 million trees over the next 25 years to create that new Western forest. And on Monday, we opened the expression of interest process for the planned forest in the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor. And we will launch the competition for a new national forest in the North or the Midlands by July this year. These new forests will bring peace, shade and joy to millions of people around the country, and that Oxcam forest will bring forestry much, much closer to her constituents. But as she says, without maintenance in the early years to help the establishment, the investment can be reduced, which is why we fund establishment and provide the expertise and advice to keep trees alive. All government-funded woodland creation must be designed and planted to the UK Forestry Standard, a world-leading technical standard for sustainable forest creation and management, agreed between all 4 UK nations. At its root is planning and design. Good planning grows strong woodlands and gives our trees the best start in life. So paying for planning isn't a cost, it's an investment in resilience. That is why we offer the Woodland Creation Planning Grant. Thousands of pounds to fund the groundwork before the first sapling goes in. But of course, once in the ground, young trees are vulnerable and need maintenance to establish. This maintenance means checking young trees for disease, replacing dead trees, and sometimes even watering during periods of drought. And that's why we also fund ongoing maintenance through the England Woodland Creation Offer. Capital payments cover the planting essentials, followed by £400 per hectare per year for 15 years to support maintenance tasks to give the trees the best possible chance of survival. We don't rely on planting alone. We also back nature's own hand. Funding for natural colonisation lets woodlands expand naturally and organically, allowing species to establish where the conditions suit them best. It may appear tatty and scruffy to some people, but nature thrives in the mess and in the wild, and it thrives best when we let it go. It is unrealistic to expect 100% survival rates, because that doesn't happen in nature, as we've seen through the recent storms. Last autumn, we witnessed a great spectacle of nature, a massed year where the overproduction of seeds and acorns blanketed woodland floors. And after woodland species have gorged themselves ready for winter, and I can tell you the squirrels in my garden are absolutely fat as butter, there is still more than enough intact material to produce the next generation of trees. Nature knows not every seed is going to make it. We mirror that approach. The schemes that we fund as government dictate that trees are planted at a higher density than would be seen in mature woodland, to take into account the natural level of tree mortality. Some trees do die, and some of them are lost to tree disease, a risk to both established and newly planted trees and woodlands. And we've seen what can happen with ash dieback, and also now with our spruces and Ips typographus, which is the six-toothed tree spruce beetle. I think I've got it vaguely right. I hope I haven't misled the House, but it's quite a mouthful. Government has a robust regulatory regime in place which minimises biosecurity risks from imported material whilst meeting World Trade Organisation standards. Recipients of many government grants are required to source trees from suppliers that meet the plant health management standard. Healthy saplings stay healthy because we prevent pathways for harm. And she got her trees book for Christmas. I am the lucky owner of a brand new almond tree for my birthday. So it's going to do battle with the olive and the bay tree, and let's see what happens. I shall report back next year. Species choice is ever more important in a changing climate. Today's species and the trees of the past may not thrive in the near future, and I've been told, for example, that cherry trees, as we have hotter, drier summers, warmer, wetter winters, are going to be a species that may not be climate resilient going forward into the future. Forestry England has published a list of 30 priority tree species selected for ability to withstand extreme weather and resist pests and diseases. And it's crucially important that those who want to plant trees and create woodlands do so with an eye on the future. Now, I said at the beginning that I agreed with most of what my honourable friend says, and I too am furious when I see parched trees lining motorways or streets or new developments where the trees have been left to die. So can I encourage local people who care about their trees to water them, particularly in the early days and particularly during hot summers? My honourable friend mentioned the Urban Tree Challenge Fund. Like our woodland creation grants, that fund doesn't simply fund planting, it provided multi-year establishment costs alongside the upfront capital costs. And in our urban tree planting grants, we require evidence of good establishment rates, and we withhold payments where this has not been met. This is not always the case for planting that is not funded by government. For example, on the new housing estate she talks about, where despite planning conditions, the same effort towards tree survival is not always made. Developers must do better. Those trees are not decorations, they're an investment that will bring future residents the benefits we have talked about today. And aesthetics cannot take priority over survival. Now, there is a wealth of guidance provided by organisations inside and outside of government on what the right tree for the right place is, and I do urge people to use it. We are improving that guidance. Our Trees Outside Woodland project compared the survival rates of different establishment approaches and concluded last year. That project concluded last year, and the findings are feeding into our grant designs for setting up new tree establishments. We have investigated over £150,000 to investigate in greater detail the causes of mortality in recently planted trees, and that work is ongoing. And of course, we have globally leading science down at Kew Gardens, and I had the pleasure of an hour with Kevin, who is their head of trees down there, who had been going over to Central Asia, to Kazakhstan, to collect tree seeds, to do this research, to work out which trees are going to work in the future. The upcoming Tree Action Plan is being developed in partnership across government and with the sector, and will emphasise the importance of using best practice. And of course, last year, as part of our procurement changes, we have also recognised the Grown in Britain timber standard. Madam Deputy Speaker, we fund tree establishment because it's good government, it's climate security, it is local pride, it is economic sense. And we know that great people are working in our community forests, through the Forest with Impact programme that is working with prisoners up at Her Majesty's Prison in Haverick in Cumbria, 250,000 seeds being produced there to create the forests of the future, working with those prisoners to make sure that social justice, reparations for their crime, also offers them a route out of crime when they leave prison, and hope for their future. Those young trees will grow into the woodlands we promised, into greener towns, resilient farms and thriving forests. So I want to conclude by thanking everyone who loved trees. Thank you for believing in the power of trees and in the potential of people. And thank you for your commitment to a greener, fairer Britain. This government will work with you, and we look forward to creating and amplifying the impact that you make.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order.